Today's guest is Simon Swords, the founder and managing director of Fundipedia, a data management platform he bootstrapped for nearly 20 years before a life-changing exit in 2025. Simon started building businesses at 16 and eventually built Fundipedia from a garden shed with an Ethernet cable and a VoIP phone. He once ran 3 businesses at the same time before choosing Fundipedia as the one to focus on and eventually landing clients like HSBC and Barclays. At one point, he thought he was having a heart attack on a client onboarding call and decided to finish the call before going to the hospital. In this episode, Simon gets really honest about the childhood traumas that made him the founder he became, what it felt like to finally get the money and realize the anxiety was still there, why he went to therapy after his biggest financial milestone and not before it, and the self-discovery and human journey he's on now post-exit. If you've ever wondered whether the exit actually sets you free, or whether the real work starts after, this one's for you. Welcome to another episode of Profit Led. I'm your host, Melissa Kwan, co-founder of eWebinar. This season, we're exploring the intersection of passion, profit, and purpose, and how those things change as founders evolve and come into financial success. Let's get started. Simon, you built Fundipedia for nearly 20 years before selling it. A lot of people hearing that now would think, hey, that's a long time, because they're reading about 2-year exits and like 1 year to 100 million, and they think that's the norm. And some might even hear this number and think, well, there's no way it's going to take me that long. So I'm in the camp that believe that great companies are built in decades, not years. And I think the media really skews our idea of success and what it should look like. What do you think about the time that you spent building, and how would you break up, I guess, those phases over the last 20 years?
I guess Fundipedia was like the final boss of a bunch of businesses that I started, right? Back in childhood, I was constantly ideating about, I could build a solution to that. The most silly example that sticks with me, but I would have had hundreds of these like every month, was like, wouldn't it be good if there was, and I'm sure, and I know for a fact that this has now been invented, but you got to bear in mind I was like 13 at the time. Like, imagine if you were blind and you were filling up a bath. You want to be able to stick a little thing in it that beeps when the water reaches a certain level, right? So there was that, which is so mundane and silly unless you're blind, obviously, in which case you don't really want to flood your house. So it's kind of important. The only reason I bring that up is to set this mindset of a childhood-driven approach to constantly looking for solutions to problems. Rightly or wrongly, for better or worse, I had to find lots of problems and kind of ideate in a business sense and ideate solutions to them. And with every kind of failure, it was kind of an iteration onto a success. And, touching on your point before I go through a lot of the failures, actually, and as you can imagine, most people don't spend a lot of time documenting them because it's much more fun to focus on the big multi-million-pound exit. But like, when you talk about people that have that 1 to 2 year, like you say, social media driven idea that, I can just get a startup, get some VC money, pump it, flip it to PE, and I'm going to go and sit on a yacht for the rest of my life. I know a few people that did have early success like that, and it ultimately blew them up. They had like initial kind of revenue and profit success, but then because they hadn't labored for years, weren't disciplined in kind of managing that. And so the thing fell over. It became too big, too quick, fell over and fell away. Without wanting to try and predict the future, OpenAI might be an example of that, like that early mega success that then wasn't disciplined and didn't go on to achieve maybe what it initially set out to. So I had loads of things that I was thinking, like in terms of iterations, like I started a speed dating company with someone back when we used to have to place articles in newspapers because you couldn't SEO or pay-per-click it to the front. I started a hardware company just before Michael Dell started Dell. And I was like, oh, right, this is cool. And then one weekend, your phone goes off and someone's network has gone down. So I picked up a couple of small business clients. I'm like, oh, this is not cool. I don't want to run a business where, A, my margins are being eaten by a mega corp like Dell, and B, my phone's going to go off because they need me to come and actually change an Ethernet card, like a PCI. Like, that's a nightmare. So then I transitioned to web design. It's like, oh, well, web design's great because you can just do it from home. And if the website breaks, you can just fix it from at home. It's infinitely more scalable. I'm also lazy, right? But like, it's a scalable type thing. And then I realized that there's no money in that. And actually, that was a race to the bottom even 20 years ago, right? And so I think about it as that was my path. I always wanted to bootstrap. The whole reason I started a business was that I wanted to be in control, and I suppose if I'm going to put my ego on the line, I wanted to be the center of attention. I wanted to, I wanted people to come to me almost, I suppose, without making it, that sounds so terrible, but like I wanted to provide value in whatever that looked like and then be worked with for that as opposed to anything else. And I suppose there was probably no other way to go about it if you wasn't willing to give up the majority shareholding of your business. I had to just iterate. And even towards the end, like if I like fast forward, I had a company that failed so badly, it's not even listed on Companies House anymore. Right. and I went to look it up because I'm sure I know I incorporated that as a business. It's not even there. They probably just deleted it out of like, they felt sorry for me or something. But even when we were building Fundy, like, and I'm talking like during COVID, so like 2020, 2021, even then I was selling another business that I'd started off to one side for, we sold that for just under 2 million to a trade buyer, Staff Squared. It was HR software for SMEs. That was a successful failure. It was making money, but it was going nowhere. But we took that money and the business before that there were 3 core businesses towards the end before Fundy really took off and had its like J curve or whatever people call it, hockey stick growth. It was like we had a bespoke or custom software company. We had Staff Squared and then we had Fundy. And Atlas, the bespoke company, and Staff Squared, the HR software company, were both kind of leveraged, if you like, to fund the growth of Fundipedia. And that's probably why it took so long. Could I have been if I was a different guy with a different mentality, I probably could have got from zero to hero damn sight quicker. But I'm kind of glad that I didn't. I think, to be disciplined over a long period of time will leave something behind that's probably certainly for me, more ingrained. The idea of a successful, I'm 43, right? The idea of a successful, that even 33-year-old Simon, who suddenly came into millions of pounds, is a scary one. I don't think that I would have been a very good or nice person with it. I don't think I would have been very healthy with it. I think that I had to go, and it's very easy to say that once you're out the other side of the journey, but I genuinely believe, like with lots of biblical stories, right? You're like, oh, it didn't need to be quite as hard as that. But it's like kind of good that it was, right? Because it yielded the outcome that you wouldn't have had that time not been invested. So that's my view on it. But like I say, it's a bootstrap view on it. It's certainly not a VCPE view on it. They would not like that.
You've shared with me that a lot of what drove you to start a business came from childhood trauma, and that your hypervigilance and anxiety found a home in entrepreneurship because it was something that you could control. So can you take me back to that? Like, what was going on in your early life and how did that shape the founder that you became?
Yeah, I've not really spoken about this before, so just about to be a bit unfiltered here and might swear a bit too, so we'll see. As part of kind of prepping for this, I pulled up my psyche val notes from my psychiatrist, who I started to go and see back in 2023. And she had to write a letter to my insurance company to make sure that they were happy to continue paying for stuff. And it was one of the best letters I ever read, which is going to sound odd when you hear what she said about me. But it was comforting in a way to hear a doctor, a proper professional, say, by the way, this was, as a result of Simon's childhood, which, by the way, is like cumulative trauma over a period of years. Simon has, and I'm reading verbatim, I'd kind of forgot. All I heard was the generalized anxiety bit at the end when I initially read it, because I was probably still a little bit hyper when I first started working with her. But I read it back today, I was like, shit, Simon has emotional dysregulation, anxiety, a tendency towards catastrophic thinking, and a fragile sense of self. He does not have a formal psychiatric diagnosis, but this would be in line with generalized anxiety presentation. And when I read that again this morning, I was like, oh, okay. And Mrs. S was in the room. She went, well, duh, which was nice. What happened in my childhood? So I was a bit of a loner. I had a head brace. That was fun. I remember answering the door once to the small group of friends that I did have, forgot that I had it on. So they all kind of recoiled. I'll never forget that experience of them kind of A, recoiling, and then B, laughing. That kind of sucked. I got beat up a few times by bullies. It's worth pointing out, I was kind of born and raised in East London. in a place called Dagenham, which was an industrialized blue collar affair. So there was a lot of people kicking around, and a lot, and their offspring, obviously, that were just devoid of anything to do. So you just so the social system just starts eating itself, right? Classrooms are full of kids that probably should have been diagnosed with some form of spectrum learning disability, which meant the whole class would just be taken offline because one kid's threatening to smash the place up and set fire to the school. I would encounter drunk people that would literally beat me up and almost knock me out, and my friends would just run away. I had debilitating hay fever. Like, I had to take steroids to get through my GCSEs. Every day I would wake up with hay fever. Fortunately, I've kind of grown out of it. But I'd wake up with my eyes kind of sealed shut and not be able to breathe very well. And so that caused me to turn into myself. And then my mum and dad shouldn't have been together is a really nice way to put it. They hated each other. My mum would work evening shifts and she would come home and they would have an argument. There'd typically be a door smashed or a plate smashed, because my dad would work from 6 a.m. till like 7 or 8 o'clock at night, as in be out the house. And my mum would go to work at like 3 or 4 o'clock and not come home till midnight. I would go home to an empty house. That was, in a way, the making of me. I taught myself to play guitar because it's better to do that. I'd teach myself like VB script or HTML because I was quite lucky I had a computer and the internet was just coming around and all of that good stuff. But it taught me a lot of self-reliance in a good and a bad way, right? Like it made me not want to rely on anybody else for help. It made me resilient in a way. I can endure pain, mental and physical, in a way that isn't normal. I wouldn't wish that on anybody else. It's not nice. These all sound like great superpowers on the surface of it, right? You would say to most people, oh my God, Simon's so tough. And where did he get all that from? Well, he got all of that from having a really horrendous time of it and using humor as a mechanism to well, look, if they're laughing, they're not beating you up. It is very much a defense strategy that I use to this day. If I'm in an awkward sales pitch for software and the internet goes down, you better believe I'm going to make people laugh. It is such a weapon. And so to kind of come back to your question, how does that shape you in business? Well, it makes you bloody good at recognizing threats. If you've got generalized anxiety, you've got two choices. You can either, and I see this a lot in a lot of people, and it's fair enough, I'm not judging. You see people just go, fuck it, I can't do it. And just sit down, right? Or walk away or go away, fight or flight, right? Or you fight and you channel that anxiety into, in my case, a very long to-do list that my wife will look at and it gives her anxiety. But ironically, she's like, I look at your to-do list and she goes, I just can't. And I'm like, well, yeah, we're wired up differently, right? That to me is focus and control and execution. And I set a big to-do list that comes down to a little to-do list that comes down, and it's all there and I can manage it and channel my thoughts through it. The idea of waking up one day and not having that, terrifying. Like, I sold the business in May last year. You better believe I'm looking at it now. I've still got a to-do list, right? Because to take that away would be to allow the anxiety to come back in, and to use a ship analogy, I would no longer be anchored. But like, rather than completely giving myself up to falling over, I 10% of that generalized anxiety went into probably not so good things for me. And the other 90% went into that business. And it was all I thought about.
So I listened to your Practical Founders podcast, which you talked a lot about your business journey. And you said in there that you would have rather died than given up.
I would have.
Was that about the business or was it about yourself and proving something?
I like the line, most ambition is just unresolved pain. But to be honest with you, Melissa, I kind of apply this approach to everything, right? I've joined a band, I'm building a car, I've got my pilot's license. I don't mind if the plane crashes and I die. I do mind if it's because I didn't do enough planning that day. But if the plane goes down because circumstances outside my control, I'm obviously going to try and survive the plane crash, but then that's life, right? So it's this weird disassociation from inputs and outputs. This kind of mentality provides you. It's that lovely, but also chaotic and anarchic take on life, which is to oversee the downsides because you're going to over prepare. I was watching a podcast the other day where some CIA recruiter was saying, we love people with anxiety. They're our favourite because they never ever turn up underprepared. In fact, they never turn up just prepared. They turn up well over prepared, and we know exactly what we're getting with them. And then we can set them another task and raise the bar even more, and they'll go and over prepare for that. They're great. I was confident that I was never going to let the business fall apart as a result of my negligence. Mm-hmm. If it did ever die, it would not have been on my watch. It would never have been Simon gave up and rolled over. It would have been bloody hell, Simon nearly killed himself. You know, the stress of it all. And especially once you start to bring other people along that journey, you've got to bear in mind, towards the end, I had like nearly 40 members of staff. And then I've got their families, and I've got, and their mortgages. So many other things going on around all of it, right? And then my clients, I don't want to let my clients down either, right? I know you know this because you run these types of businesses too. So it wouldn't have just been me giving up. It would have been giving up for them too. And if I ever did have to say to them, guys, it's blown up, it's dead, I'm so sorry, they would have visibly seen in my body, I would have had blood pouring out of me that I did everything I could have done. And they would have gone, fucking hell, Si, you've got to stop, mate, because you're going to kill yourself. Again, it's probably that emotional dysregulation coming in again. I would not feel happy unless they could see that I was bleeding out for it and for them. And that's what creates this incredible thing, but obviously is not great for you, the individual, to put it mildly.
I mean, for years you were running 3 businesses until, your mentor called you out, you chose Fundipedia as the one business that you were going to focus on. How many years did it take before you were out of survival mode and that you felt like things were getting easier? Was it like compounded success, or was it like a single event that happened?
It was a single event. So as you all know, when you first start a business, especially as a young person, or if you're an immature idiot, and you can be an older person and be an immature idiot. So I know a few of those, bless them. You don't see the distinction between the business bank account and your bank account, right? Oh, it's £500,000 in the business bank account. I'm a £500,000. No, you're not. You haven't paid tax on that money to put it out to your personal bank account. You are not £500,000. You have access to £500,000, but you will go to prison if you take that out and run away with it, because there's people that are like, you know what I mean? So the business started to get some decent funding in it. We landed HSBC around 2019, 2020. They were paying us they were our biggest client by a country mile. And we were just to onboard HSBC took about a year. And I think my chairman, who is a very, very smart man, John, ridiculously smart, and not just smart intelligence-wise, smart emotionally at reading people, right? So he would have seen in me all the things that my psychiatrist saw. He could see that I was pouring my heart into getting HSBC live. I remember one of the times we were onboarding HSBC, I thought I was having a heart attack. I'm not joking. I genuinely had a pain in my chest that I thought, I've got to stay on this call because it's an important HSBC onboarding call. But if this pain's still here by the time I get done, which again is ridiculous, right? You're having a pain in your chest. Most normal people would go, screw HSBC. I genuinely think, bearing in mind, this is a compounding of nigh on, at that point, 16 years of stress and anxiety. I've got to go straight to the hospital. My take on it was, I'll just finish this chat about how we're going to get the JSON files from this server to that server, the GRD server or whatever. And then, so long as the pain's still this bad or worse, I will then go to the hospital like nuts, right? I only bring up that element of it to kind of, as one very small, if I'm honest, example of how nuts it was, like the magnitude of pressure that I was under. And then John said, let's go and talk to some people, because now that we're getting up to these levels of revenue, we should be able to, maybe sell a bit of the business to like a PE type company or whatever. And we take some skin out of the game, right? Because at the moment, I had at that time 99% of my net worth tied up in this business, right? So he could see, bless him, the dichotomy of, my goodness, this looks like mega success on the business side, but Si's still living a life of, well, put it this way, some of my staff were earning more than me, right? Which is fine, that's just life. And all of my clients, bear in mind, we're selling to financial services business. And John is from a financial services background, so he knows that world inside out and back to front. So, and I'm having dinner with these firms, these people trying, they're on $500,000 a year. I was probably earning 60 grand a year, 70 grand a year, right? So he could see that very smartly. He could tell that if we didn't do something to address that imbalance, sooner or later, I was going to start to wonder what it was all about. So anyway, we went and did this chat, had a chat with a couple of like investment type businesses. And then one day John said, how much do you want? Like, just what number would give you comfort that if it all fell over tomorrow, you would feel like this wasn't a waste of 15, 16 years of your life? I said, well, £1 million is a nice round number, John.
John is your business partner.
He was my chairman and second largest shareholder in the business, yeah. And he said, fuck it, I'll write you a check for £1 million. Fine, let's do that. Let's stop worrying about getting third-party people involved. I'll buy you out. You sell your shares to me. I'll give you £1 million, there or thereabouts. And the numbers didn't quite come to that. Like there was some backs and forwards on it. But
you didn't sell all your shares. It was like a portion.
It was just a very small amount at the time for a chunk of money that in any circle, from any working class background, you would say, prior to the event that I then had last year, it was a life-changing amount of money, right?
Yeah.
It just was. And I remember getting the money. I remember still being knee-deep in the work. And I remember waking up one day and going, fuck me, the anxiety's still there. This has all been a total waste of time. And it was about then that I went to see Dr. Amy and the psych, doctor, and had a chat with her about everything. And she, did an incredible job using CBT of taking me through a process of reevaluating what it is to be me and take me on a journey to get comfortable with that. Because up until, because it did not bring the relief, if you like, that I was looking for. It just didn't, which I was devastated about. But bit of therapy and all of that good stuff. It took another 6 to 12 months, but after quite a lot of therapy, I did get to a place where I could start to. I didn't unwind properly because obviously you can't because you're still in the trenches, right? But I certainly started to calm down a bit and think, right, this is no longer life or death. This won't have been a 15-year waste of time. I can hold my head up a bit.
What I find interesting about your story is most people assume the hard inner work happens during the struggle. But for you, most of that work and therapy came after the business became successful and you had crossed that, that milestone. You also said on another podcast that your therapist helped you stop chasing the dragon. What is that dragon?
I set myself a target to have a successful business. One of the mistakes I probably did make at the outset is not defining what success was. For me, it was control and independence, but that's so vague because I hadn't said, well, when I have X amount of money in my bank, that means that I'm going to be happy. And maybe even if I had said that, it wouldn't have come true anyway. So it probably would have been a nonsense. But I think the dragon that I was chasing was, I suppose, not ending up back in Dagenham. I used to have a recurring dream about ending up back in Dagenham. The things that happened in my childhood coming back to haunt me, like being weak, getting beat up, being socially ostracized, not feeling like I did have anybody who had my back, right? These were all things that definitely wrongly, taught me that, well, the only person you can trust is yourself. So I suppose the dragon that I was chasing was me. I was trying to get to a point where I could genuinely look at myself in the mirror, like I'm looking at myself on this podcast now, and say, "Si, you're okay, mate. You're okay. You're safe, right?" I had to get the circumstances of my life to such a place through mega amounts of control freakery, channel everything in and discipline over all these years to get to the point where I could go, right, I can now, I only look at my to-do list for an hour a day now, right? I used to look at it all day, every day, and so on.
So you had some financial relief earlier, but did that not change the way you worked at all? Like, were you still getting up, building the business, like growing it?
I suppose what it did is it took the pressure off of me in the sense of, I think one of the things John would say if he was on this call, he would say, Si was probably still being too risk averse for where he had got to, because he was struggling to recognize that he had made progress. You know, when I met him, he was maybe at the foot of the mountain, but now he's at, like, I don't know, using an Everest analogy, he's at base camp 2, right? He doesn't seem to be celebrating that. He's certainly not acknowledging that, let alone celebrating it. I got to do something here to get him to the point where he doesn't feel like everything he's done has been for nothing, but equally not set him up so much that when I call him up, he's on a yacht in the Bahamas, you know? So, so that was probably the balance, you know, of where I got to. No, you know, you got to bear in mind, my mum was an employee, you know, there were lots and lots of things going on there that were, it was a running joke, and I didn't give myself this name because I'm not that much of an arsehole, but people call me Mr. Fundipedia, right? And I took that as a joke, but I also took that very seriously, right? I am Mr. I've made promises to these individuals that I'll be honest with you, don't particularly care about HSBC, right? They're a big bank. Let me put it this way. I care about HSBC as much as HSBC cares about me, right? Which is not very much. But I do care about the person that I made that promise to, that I said I'd get that JSON file from my system to that system by Friday. It's happening, right? So there was a lot of, like, the macro view on it is that I don't let myself down, but then the micro view on it is I've got lots of legal and non-legal contracts with lots of people, and I'm not just going to not fulfill them. I'm not that guy. You know, some people might have taken that money and gone, that's enough, I can tap out now, or at least tap down now and take, but that wasn't me. I left my foot well and truly on my own neck until the end.
And you ran the whole exit process by yourself with your chairman and ChatGPT. What did it feel like to negotiate really a life-changing deal on your own terms? And were you genuinely prepared to walk away from it if it fell apart?
Yeah, I tell you now, I would have. I might have told the story on the other one about how the people that were working for the firm that bought us were inherently fair. They really were. And I just wouldn't bring it up if they weren't, right? I'm not going to 2020 or try and be, like, disingenuous in hindsight and say, oh, they were really good guys because they gave me a load of money. I just wouldn't talk about them. I'd rather say nothing than hold a mistruth out there for how they treated me. They were fair, and the way that they ran their operation to bring Fundipedia into the business was, there's no such thing as perfect M&A, but they ran it fairly, and they never at any point did or said anything they themselves that made me want to say, screw this, I'm out. But lawyers and accountants don't play those games, especially lawyers. And there was one time, and again, this is not the buyer's fault, the lawyer asked me to do something about an employee's contract. We were maybe 3 weeks away from closing the deal. So we closed it on the 28th of May, and I was downstairs, and Leanne, my wife, was in the background because she's, as you can imagine, motivated to stay in the loop, because she was also head of marketing for the business, right? So she wasn't just an innocent bystander in all of this. She really poured her heart into the last few years of getting the business where she got it to. And one of their lawyers asked me to do something with one of my senior members of the sales team's contract. And I remember saying, no, I'm not doing it. And he said, well, the problem is, Simon, if you don't do it now, bear in mind this is the lawyers, not the buyers speaking. Problem is, Simon, if you don't do it now, then once the transaction is complete, we lose all of our leverage. I said, well, call the deal off then. I don't remember thinking very much about how I felt at the time, although I genuinely would have, but I do remember looking up and seeing Leanne stop what she was doing and turn around and look at me with the most, oh my fucking God, what have you just done face ever, which I love. And, but I meant it, Melissa. I truly meant it. There was no way on the way out I was turning over a member of staff who'd been, like, maybe not served with the business for as long as some of the guys. I'm really blessed that I had guys working in that business when it sold that have been with me since they left school, like nigh on 20 years ago, right? Which I take as a massive positive in terms of how they see, hopefully, me and by extension the business. But no, there was no way I was going to let that happen. And that's one event that sticks with me only because of more of the reaction of Leanne's side than anything else. I just remember her face, like she nearly dropped whatever it is she was doing, right? But there was loads of that on the way through where I would have rather, and I suppose it's easy to say that because also it wasn't a forced sale. Like we didn't need to exit. The business was insanely, like, it was doing well, and I think we were on the trajectory that, look, I'm not sad about when I got out because AI and cybersecurity and all the things that are now, every time I load up whatever your preferred podcast is, you hear about, right, which terrifies me, including the ability to write software in a weekend that would have taken me a year, 5 years ago, right? So I'm not unhappy about when I got out, but we were a data company. So I'm not saying we were totally shielded, but the value of the business was in the IP and the data. I probably could have pushed it for another year or two, So I felt like we could have kept going. And worst case scenario, I would have carried on working with some great people for another year or two. Like we turned down an offer the year before we did sell. And I always described that as like finishing a marathon and then being asked to run another 10K like the next day. Well, fuck, if you can do that, you can probably run another 5K, like just keep going. I would have kept going and I wouldn't have been sad about it.
But when the deal closed, you cried. So were those tears of joy, relief, sadness, like all of it? What was that?
I wasn't sad about it. It was relief. I mean, I'm still processing it now. One of the best bits of advice I was given after the sale was that for every year that you spent in the trenches, you need a month to decompress. Imagine you're a deep sea diver. And if you try and come up for oxygen too quickly, you will get the bends. I tried to come up for oxygen way too quickly. Like I was like, I can just go and swim at the surface now, catch some rays and come up from my, deep sea where you got the fish with the light on the front of them, the weird looking monsters. I was down there with those guys. It was so weird, Melissa. I think you've had an exit, right?
Yeah, not as big as yours, but I had some financial relief as well. Hey, I want to take a minute to talk about the thing that makes my life and this podcast possible, my own company, eWebinar. Here's something no one questions. We expect every piece of content in our personal lives to be available on demand, from this podcast to our favorite TV show. But when it comes to business webinars, whether it's demos, training sessions, or onboarding calls, anything where a live person has to show up and deliver content, we're still asking people to be somewhere at a specific time on one specific day, hoping they'll make it, and it just doesn't scale. The average attendance rate for a live webinar is 30 to 40%. That means the majority of people who want your content never see it. Prospects who never see your demo don't convert. Customers who skip onboarding don't activate. Anyone who misses training won't adopt your product. eWebinar was built to solve that. We turn any video into an interactive experience that runs on autopilot 24/7 in every time zone. Your audience joins when it works for them, and our live chat lets you respond to questions in real time or later through email, so every question gets answered and nobody feels ignored. It outperforms live by every metric. Attendance, watch times, engagement, and conversion rates are all higher. When live delivery is no longer the bottleneck, you open up a whole new world of opportunities, and that's the real unlock. You're not just replacing the webinars you're already doing. You're finally creating all the ones you never had bandwidth for. The onboarding series, the product walkthrough, the sales demo for that segment you've been meaning to go after. Come see it for yourself. Visit ewebinar.com to join our demo at your own time.
So I'm talking to someone who will understand this, and there aren't many people who understand this, so it's a weird thing to talk about, right? When you've invested basically most of your life, because I started working on this when I was 16, right? If you add up all the failures, and I'm 43 now, I spent more time trying to get here than not. And you can't really include ages 0 to 10, because that's just a fucking write-off, right? Like, so really, formative years, 10 to 16, then at 16 went full bore until I was 42. So there's no way that you can have an event, however big, the number could have been 10x what I was given, and then suddenly go, great, I can relax now. Like, it's just not gonna, right? It's just impossible. Your body's you're gonna wake up the next day and the next day and the next day, and your body's still gonna be going, right? Like, the levels of cortisol in my body were high, like they would be in any kind of fight or flight situation for decades. So no, there was no instant relief or happiness or sadness. I did cry when I had the phone call in this room. I remember going downstairs and saying to Leanne, it's done. And then I had a big old cry. It was more a cry of just letting out 25 years of, maybe even 42 years-ish of pain and self-loathing and disgust with, who I am and why, like torment and overthinking everything, and like literally 20, 30 years of just everything I wished for young Simon that I could have just got done so much quicker, but didn't. But thank goodness I got it done ultimately, like that was what it was. It wasn't, yeah, I'm loaded. No, it still isn't, if I'm honest, Melissa. It really isn't. Like, the money is a happy side effect of what I did. To have done it purely for the money wouldn't have yielded the same outcome. I did it because I hated. I was angry. It was I did it to channel anxiety and anger into something, because otherwise I would have just gone down the pub and blown my face out and been dead by 40. So rather than that, I just channeled it all into a business that, thank God, I met the right people along the way that got me, we all got where we wanted to be.
I mean, you said something to me that I think a lot of successful people feel, but no one says out loud, which is, once you have money and options, you are no longer allowed to be sad. Like, tell me about that.
Because I am sad. Not allowed to feel sad. You're not allowed to tell all, right? I mean, there's just so much to unpack in that one silly little statement, right? Like, all your mates are still working. They start there, right? We've all got mortgages, relatively young children. I'm only 43. Some of my mates have got babies, They're all up against it. They're all staring down the barrel of working until they're at least 55, 60, 65, depending on where they are on things. They're all subject to the same things that everybody is, social media, this thing that you touched on earlier about how success should be a 2-year thing, right? Well, guess what? That applies in the working world too. Why aren't you a VP yet? Why aren't you a director yet? Why aren't you this, that, or the other? Why aren't you earning 6 figures? Why do you only have a 5-bedroom detached house in Kent? You should be living in Belgravia. Like all of these expectations sit heavy on their shoulders too. So there's a lot going on there. There's the having to be careful about how I manage interactions around money, right? I want to do fun shit that costs a lot more than they can afford. I lie sometimes about what stuff costs me so that they will come, and I let them contribute towards it. So this isn't really directly answering the you can't be sad. It's more, how do you manage the interactions to your friends that haven't had an event like the one that I'm so fortunate to have had, right? Sometimes, and I know they know that I'm lying. Hey man, I've got a spare Muse ticket. Do you want to come to Brixton Academy? No, I haven't, but I'm going to go on via GoGo and spend 500 quid a ticket. Do you want to come? Like that would be the real chat. And he would go, I'm not letting you spend 500 quid on me for a spare. This was for my cousin literally 2 weeks ago, right? He's like one of the best concerts ever. I cried at the concert because I know how much that meant to him. right? And I enjoyed it, don't get me wrong, but I got so much joy out of him being there with me. And he wouldn't have come if I'd said, do you want to spend, that on the ticket? Because he would have said, that's nonsense. And he wouldn't have let me do it either, right? Because he's got pride like me. It feels like years pass between speaking to some friends and I have to remind myself that they're all so busy. That's a weird thing. I've got all day, every day, if I choose to sit down and do nothing. And sometimes I have to, I've not heard from, I'm going to say Sam, right? Sam for like a week. Is he upset with me? And I go back through my messages. Have I said something? No, I don't think so. Okay, cool. And then he'll text me and go, like, literally, it'll always be like this way an hour later. I'm so sorry, dude. Like, I've had this and that, and my son's not been well. Oh, okay, cool. And that had to happen a few times. And then I was honest with Sam. Funny enough, Sam's a real guy who lives down the road from me. I was honest with him about it. He went, oh, dude, oh, man, like, that sucks. And I was like, yeah, man, but obviously it's on me. He's like, well, yeah, but I see how you get there, like thinking that people have fallen out with you because they're not talking to you, like, or you've not heard from them for a week or two. I mean, the irony is that I don't hear from my dad from 1 month to the next. So, like, there's some weird dynamics going on with all of that. But there's the comms, there's the money, there's the I don't go and talk to them. And, like, you can't have a chat with them and be like, my wealth manager's trying to charge me 2% a year to manage my money. And I think the fee drag on this is too high. What do you think, guys?
No, you shouldn't say that.
No, as if.
Don't say that
as
one.
if. So, and then obviously, you still have births, marriages and deaths to contend with. It's so hard, right? Like, everybody knows that I'm bloody loaded, right? Everybody knows, or at least expects, therefore, that I am living the life that they would live if they were bloody loaded, right? Because most people would sit there and go, well, if I had that amount of money, you better believe I would be doing this, I'd have that, I'd go and buy this, I don't like my car, I'd change my car, I'd change my house, I'd change my wife or husband, like, everybody in their head has got a to-do list that they will, when they're having a beer or whatever, sit there and go, I go to Magaluf. I'd buy a Pied à Terre, whatever it's called, in London. I'd stay at the Pan Pacific and get a massage. Like, a list. Everybody had, like, I had it when I was building the business. Reality is, when you get the money, you do that. I did do that. I got a private chopper to the Four Seasons in Hampshire and took my mates. You better believe I did. I went shooting while drunk and for shit champagne. Like, I did all of that. You can't do that forever. So suddenly, you have this massive peak of really cool things that you do, but then real life starts to set in. My foot hurts. My wife's not been well recently. I've got a cold, and so. I don't know. I'm really not answering this question directly, other than to say, and this isn't how I mean it, but it is a job to make sure that you manage your relationships. And the thing that I am most privileged to have, I'm quite lucky and good at making new friends. It is a bit of an art or a skill, however you want to put it. But equally, I'm absolutely conscious of the fact that I've got friends that have known me since I had fuck all. And those relationships are so valuable because they will. I said something, you were just saying you can't say that. I said something, it wasn't that, but I said something similar to that to a friend about 3 months after I sold the business. And I won't tell you what C word he used, but you can use your imagination, right? He went, boo-hoo, you C word. And now that's a running meme between us, right? Because I'll be like, oh, Tom, I was just about, he went, oh, am I about to boo-hoo you? And you can't put a price on that level of anchorage to reality. Like, you'll say, I'll be like, oh, it's only £5,000. It's not only £5,000, Simon, it's £5,000, mate. It's a lot of money. And it's also, talk about managing relationships. I've got a 12-year-old, I'm pointing because he's still on bloody school holidays because he's at private school. So I seem to pay more and he doesn't do as much education. He gets a 3-week Easter break, right? So he's still in there, bless him. But not at school, frustratingly. But I have to manage it with him too. I've lied to him. I said, you're not getting any inheritance, mate. Just so you know. You're not. And by the way, we were driving in the car the other day. I said, you do realise you're in the top 1% of wealth, not in this country, in the world. He was like, what? I went, Yeah. In fact, I think you're probably in the top 0.1% there or thereabouts. And he couldn't get his, bless him, he's only 12, he's quite grown up, but he couldn't, it's like, what does that mean? I said, look, we'll sit down and have a longer conversation about this when today, maybe tomorrow, maybe when you're a bit older. But you don't know, mate. You have no idea where you are in the world. You've absolutely won the lottery. Like, you just have, like to have the things that we've got and to have a dad that can now be around the way that I am is just ridiculous. You're so lucky.
Well, he'll enjoy this for another decade, and he'll have a hand into it later.
Maybe not. I mean, we'll see. I'll be honest with you, Melissa. My aim is to try and spend most of it before I die. I'm not joking. So,
well, you've got quite a few years to go.
Spend it or give it away. That's for sure.
I mean, how do you think about passion and purpose and happiness now that you are financially comfortable?
So I'm still passionate, if you can't tell. I don't necessarily find purpose in business anymore. I'm not saying I never will again, but I did look for it towards the end of last year. And every time I got close to it, it was like a bit like going to Chernobyl. Like, even with a hazmat suit on, I'd get there and I could feel the radiation of and it was a bit too real watching founders struggle with what I'd been through and seeing them struggle with it. And knowing viscerally what they're going through. Their VCs just turned them over, making them shut the business down, for example. Or they just can't get sales through the door fast enough because who knew enterprise sales takes years? Well, you should have, but here we are. So I tried to lean into finding purpose back in work because that was it's a bizarre contradiction, but like a safe space. Or certainly a place where I could channel my anxiety. And realised over Christmas when I nearly had a panic attack because I was sat down with somebody and they started telling me some stuff. You ever had a panic attack?
No.
Oh, you're blessed. Keep it that way.
I plan to.
Yeah, good, do. Once you've had one, it's like a door that you can't shut again. So I've only had about 4 in my lifetime. But once you've had one, you can spot the early warning signs, and as much as you would think, well, that would mean that you can then take steps to avoid it. It doesn't work like that, unfortunately. A panic attack, once that door's open, you can't shut it. You will just get sucked back through it again. So you have to work even harder to stay away from the door, if that makes sense. Well, in the run up to Christmas, I nearly had one, and I had 7 coffees. It was partly my fault. I was off my face on caffeine. But again, I was only using that as a mechanism to get through all these meetings that I was booking for myself because I was thinking, right, I'm going to go back and let's do this. And this is how I used to be, right? And it was about after I had that near miss panic attack and I was in a public place too, it would have been a right disaster, that I was like, right, I know you need purpose and I know you're looking for passion and purpose. And I know that you could help these people. So I really do. I get it, right? With all of that knowledge and obviously the money you could invest too, I get that you want to go back there, but it's that whole for each year that you were there, you need a month off. You might never be able to go back there again, right? Let's just start there. You might never have it in you to do that again, but you can't be without purpose either because that's just going to create an absolute idiot, right? You're going to blow yourself up. So what are you going to do? So I went away and I wrote a business plan for myself in January, right? And listed a bunch of things that I'll put them up now, actually, rather than just wing it. I set some goals for 2026, and these are going to sound so trite and boring and self kind of indulgent, but it's all I had when I was sat in January thinking, I can't just not have a plan because then all of that energy isn't going to go, it's only going to go somewhere bad. And that bad could be as bad as negative thoughts and overthinking or as bad as alcohol and drugs, right? Which I just can't have. And would be such a shame and a waste of life given where I am, right? I now feel this enormous sense of responsibility to maximize not just the longevity of the amount of time. I kind of want the 20 years back that I gave up, if that makes sense. Like, I kind of want to go at least 1-for-1 ratio on the years that I put in to the years of upside. So anyway, just reading off the stuff on the list. I wanted to join a band. I used to be in a band when I was a kid. I can play a bunch of instruments. So I've rejoined a band, a metal band, as a drummer. I set myself a target to play 10 gigs this year. I want to run a half marathon. I was meant to do one a couple of months ago, but I sprained my ankle skiing. So I'm now doing one in Hackney next month. So that's going to be a thing. I want to do a half Ironman. Building a car. I'm just about to contradict myself. I am mentoring 2 businesses, but I'm doing it on the basis that I've been able to be honest with them that mentally I can't go all in. So if any time they email me or text me or call me and I'm not around, I'm sorry, guys, you just got to accept that. And they've kind of accepted to work with me on that basis. Had they not been up for that, I would have said, well, then I can't help you. But they're kind of happy to have as much as I can give rather than nothing. So I had to kind of manage that. I'm working on a book. I've got a blog that I'm doing that whole write a load of blog posts and I'll turn it into a book one day rather than just sit down and try and write a book. I want to enter a chess tournament. I love chess. It's a bit of an addiction, if I'm honest. And I want to enter a poker tournament, ideally in Las Vegas. Because again, I just love, as you can imagine, that scratches my brain. So yeah, that for me is across like physical and mental well-being, those targets. And I treat that everything I just listed there. Some people would go, well, they're nice hobbies. My brain doesn't work like that. My brain's like, they're now getting done. I'm not going to die trying to run a half marathon. If I don't feel well, I'll just stop. Right? It's not that level anymore. But certainly that's my job. It is my job. And if I get to December and I haven't ticked off most, if not all of it, I'll say, well, I didn't do my job this year. I've got to do better next year. That's just who I am, unfortunately.
Well, last question for you. Looking back across your entire journey, what's the thing that you're most proud of?
I suppose the obvious answer is not having given up.
Yeah.
Like I got sued for £1 million. Most people would have given up. I lost good members of the team at critical points. I could have given up then. I had a cancer scare. They thought I had lymphoma. I've got this gnarly little scar on my neck that you can't see. That I remember thinking, it's about then that I was like, I really am killing myself here. If my immune system is so broken that the doctor's misdiagnosing me with cancer, I've got to stop. But I didn't. Some people would have gone, my health comes first. I went, no, my health doesn't come first, actually. It's not even second or third. It's nuts, right? But some people would have, I had so many things go wrong and sideways. I could have absolutely leveraged as a reason for, I better stop now. I'm drinking too much to numb the pain of all the stress. So I've got to stop now. No, I'll wake up on a hangover and I'll get on a call and I'll do the demo. I booked in a demo for 9 o'clock. It doesn't matter that I've only had 3 hours sleep. I'm doing the demo. And Leanne used to say to me, Mrs. S, I can't believe you did that demo this morning. You were drunk last night. How did you do it? It's like, it was non-negotiable, Lee. What part of non-negotiable do you know? So I suppose that the second thing that I'm most proud of, though, because it's not just about me, I'd like to think that along the way I touched, and my job, in terms of purpose going forward, I want this, just because I'm not doing it through work doesn't mean I'm not doing it. Me doing these other hobbies that I'm talking about, they're not all just about self-serving. They're about finding ways to build connections with people and touch people in a way that emotional connections, right? I created emotional connections with people, I'd like to think, or at least I felt it. I'm sure, hopefully they did too. Be that staff, be that clients, be that other fintechs that were in the ecosystem who I could just say, dude, keep going. It's going to be all right, all of that, right? Helping people through tough times when they were employees, lending them money, even without the money, just telling them that they're doing a good job, whatever, in whatever format it came in. I'd like to think, I might be wrong. I always wish that when you walk around, like in The Sims, you get the stats above their heads. I wish that was a thing in real life, because I'd love to know, like, whether I'm well out on the number of people that I had an emotional connection and impact on, and loads of people did it for me too, right? It's not a one-way street. But I'd like to think emotionally I connected. Well, put it this way. One of my guys was at a conference yesterday, and he texted me after the conference and said loads of people came up and asked, where are you and how are you getting on site, right? And I took that and I joked, obviously being me, I wrote back and went, I hope you told him to piss off and leave me alone, just as a joke, right, obviously. But on the inside, I went, fucking hell, that's amazing. Like, they actually really like me. Because obviously in my childhood, I didn't have anyone like me. So, yeah, I'd like to think that I left a mark on a few people in a good way. And I think, the two things are interlinked, right? I never gave up because I saw those little glimmers of connection, and they're addictive. I was addicted to those things being possible, and wanted to have as many of them. And I still do want to have as many of those little fleeting moments of connections with other human beings as any one person can before I die, and I'm proud of that. I'm proud that I have that mentality.
Well, Simon, thank you so much for coming on the show and taking the time to share your story. That's a really good one.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to. And obviously, I hope that it helps anybody else out there who's on their own journey.
Real quick, if what we talked about today resonated with you, the best thing you can do to pay it forward is to share it with someone you think would enjoy it too. The only way this podcast grows is by word of mouth. Whether that's a review, a post, or even a text to a friend, it would mean the world to me and would help me keep this podcast going. Hit subscribe so you never miss an episode, and head over to profitled.fm for show notes. If you want to connect or share feedback, I'd love to hear from you. Find me at melissakwan.com. That's MELISSAKWAN.com. Thanks for listening. Bye now.